wind. It will turn breezy across the board, but the winds will be particularly strong out towards the west of Scotland. And of course, with the keen breeze, temperatures will hold up, whether you've got clear skies or cloud to start off Friday. I think we're looking at low teens for most places. Some showery rain in the far southeast on Friday morning. Bright spells elsewhere, but further showers pushing into the north and northwest, and increasingly windy. Friday and Saturday, we're likely to see gales in western Scotland.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers.
Yeah. We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hi there, welcome to Brazier. Some fast-paced news from 4 until 6 for you today. In the next hour, at least one person has died and around 30 others are injured after a car drove into a crowd in Berlin this morning before crashing through a shop window. Did the driver intentionally do this? It looks like he did, if reports this hour suggest, as he's left a note, are to be believed. The actor John Barrowman witnessed the incident. He'll bring you and me his eyewitness account live from the German capital in a couple of moments. Also, British Airways cancelled more than 100 flights from Heathrow, whilst EasyJet and Wizz Air also continue to ground their flights. The boss of Heathrow says holiday flights could take, wait for it, up to 18 months to return to normal. The former boss of Monarch will have his say. And for the debate this hour, we're asking, would you be a have-a-go hero? The family of a man who died after using his skateboard to fight off one of the murderous London Bridge attackers as others fled to safety. They're campaigning for him to be canonised as a saint with the backing of the Roman Catholic Church. I'll discuss whether we need more community heroes in the UK with former Detective Chief Superintendent of the Met, Kevin Hurley, and former SAS trooper Phil Campion. Do they think you should get stuck in or stand by with your smartphone? I think I know the answer to that question. With me for the next 2 hours, Ronald Reagan enthusiast Sarah Elliott joins me to reflect on what the former president would do about tax cuts. First, the latest news headlines.
Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 4. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister told MPs he's getting on with his job as he faced the Commons for the first time since surviving Monday's confidence vote in his leadership. Although Mr Johnson won the vote, 40% of his own party said they had no confidence in him. The vote was prompted by the Sue Gray report into lockdown parties, but MPs are also unhappy with legislation to override the Northern Ireland Protocol and high taxes. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer challenged Boris Johnson on the NHS and said that when the Prime Minister falls short, he changes the rules and lowers the bar.
Pretending no rules were broken didn't work. Pretending the economy is booming didn't work. And pretending to build 40 new hospitals won't work either. They want him to change, but he can't.
But what we're doing more fundamentally is doing what the people of this country can see is simple common sense, and that is using our economic strength to invest in doctors and nurses and get people on the wards, get people, giving people their scans and their screens and their tests in a more timely manner and taking our NHS forward.
Well, in news just in, members of the Unite union at Transport for London and London Underground have announced that they also will strike on the 21st of this month, the same day as a walkout by the RMT. It comes after the Prime Minister labelled the industrial action as reckless and unwanted. The RMT plans to walk out on the 21st, 23rd and 25th of June, which they're calling the biggest strike on the railways since 1989. The planned strikes coincide with Glastonbury Festival and the Test match cricket. The Independent's travel editor, Simon Calder, says the dispute is between the unions and the government.
The union is betting that, yes, they can shut down the country. The government is thinking, hang on, we've probably got enough people who we can rely on, and people, of course, not needing to commute in the same numbers as they did before. We are probably going to see not a fully effective strike. So I think the first 3 days of strikes are going to go ahead, and then there will be some talks after that. But I'm kind of bedding in for a long summer of discontent, I'm afraid.
A Berlin politician says that placards relating to Turkey have been found in the car of a man who allegedly drove into a crowd of people, killing one person. Germany's Bild newspaper says the victim was a teacher who had been with a group of her schoolchildren in the west of the capital. Police say more than a dozen people have been injured. 6 have life-threatening injuries. The 29-year-old German-Armenian driver has been detained.
Befindet sich jetzt in unserem Gewahrsam.
The man was taken in immediately and is currently in our custody. We are now trying to reconstruct the crime, meaning our traffic accident commando is here. We have investigators here who are looking at the evidence, who talk to witnesses, and we are questioning the suspect.
Well, actor John Barrowman happened to be in the area at the time. In a video posted to Twitter, he described what he saw.
The car came down onto the pavement, then has come onto the road over there, has hit somebody, then has gone down the road and come back onto the pavement down that way, and come back onto the pavement and gone through a bunch of people, gone through the photograph that I posted of a cafe, and then right into a storefront window. I heard the bang and the crash when we were in a store, and then we came out and we just saw the carnage.
The UK's Crown Prosecution Service has authorised indecent assault charges against Hollywood film producer Harvey Weinstein. The 70-year-old faces 2 counts of indecent assault against a woman between July and August of 1996. The decision follows a review of evidence gathered during a Met Police investigation. The force says the woman is now in her 50s. Labour MP Afzal Khan warns that cancelled holidays caused by a backlog in passport applications could cost families £1 billion this summer. During Prime Minister's questions, he challenged Boris Johnson to do more to reduce the delays.
2 weeks ago, the Prime Minister told the House, to the best of my knowledge, everybody is getting their passport within 4 to 6 weeks. However, the Passport Office is currently quoting a 10-week service time, with many of my constituents waiting well over that period.
91% are getting their passport within 6 weeks, I can tell him, Mr. Speaker. And we are putting hundreds and hundreds more staff into the Passport Office.
This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get back to Colin Brazier.
Well, look, we'll start by taking you abroad today. At least one person's died, several injured after a car drove into a crowd in West Berlin before crashing into a shop window. Not known yet, not for sure anyway, if the incident was intentional. The driver of the car has been identified as a 29-year-old German-Armenian man. Germany's Bild newspaper, it's their equivalent of The Sun, best-selling newspaper, it's reporting an apparent letter of confession, it's been described as being in the crashed car, its contents not made public at this stage. The incident took place in a part of the German capital, popular with tourists, street-side cafes, and yards away from the scene of the 2016 terror attack. I wonder if you remember this one, which saw a dozen fatalities when a Tunisian Islamic State radical used a lorry to mow down pedestrians at a Christmas market. Entirely unclear at this stage whether that is a coincidence or is in any way relevant. The actor John Barrowman and his partner Scott Gill witnessed the incident in Berlin, from where they join us now. Thanks for your time and welcome. John, if I can start with you, what did you see?
Well, we came out of a shop which was directly across the street from where the incident happened. And we thought at first it was a traffic accident because we saw the car that had gone through the cafe area and then gone into the storefront window. My husband, Scott, went over to the incident. I followed him over, and we saw somebody on the ground being dragged away because the car door to the Renault Clio was open. So clearly the driver had been taken out. We then were going to head down to the bank where we were going to change some money. And when we started walking down that street, that's when we saw the dead body in the middle of the street. And we realized that something bigger is happening here. The people who were at the top, where the car went in the window, didn't know that the person was dead down there. So there was like different areas and pockets of people thinking different things were happening. And when we continued to walk, that's when we saw in front of the bank where we were headed in the Levi's store, that was when we saw other people on the ground. And that's the picture you're looking at right now. And then within seconds, those emergency service people appeared and started treating people. I thought they were dead, but they started treating them. And I remember that one person was thrown onto a stretcher and other people were being CPR'd and treated. But it was carnage. It was, from what we saw, we kind of walked the path while before they brought other emergency services in to then cordon everybody off. We were already in the middle of it, walking up the path, and Scott did a bit of a detailed area of a view of where the driver came from here, and then drove down, and the person who had died was about here. All of the people who were lying on the ground when we arrived at this point were here. This is where he then drove into the window of the store going through the cafe area opposite the Europa Center, and that we came out of the store, which was directly across the street. So from what we were able to see on the ground, from the mess and the poor people were just bowled over, there's no way that it was a person collapsing. Deliberately targeted. Yeah, it was deliberately done, because also there was last night when we had dinner in that corner, we walked home and we didn't find out until today that it was across the street where the Christmas market stuff had happened. But there were bollards all over the place to protect people from the cars, but the car was going so fast, one of those bollards exploded and all over the road.
That's really interesting. I mean, Scott, I remember being sent to cover, do you remember that dreadful, you mentioned the Christmas market attack in 2016. I mean, it may be a coincidence, right, that it's happened so close here. But I remember being sent to cover the Nice lorry attack. Very similar modus operandi then. It was a terror attack. Young man in lorry bowling through literally dozens of people. One thing that struck certainly the journalists who were covering that story then were the eyewitness reports. And as you say, there's what you see, there's also what you hear. And Scott, I just wonder whether the first thing actually oftentimes is what you hear. If the car really was travelling, some reports suggested anything up to 90 miles per hour, you're going to hear the high-pitched whine of an engine being stretched to the limit. You're going to hear people being hit or a bollard being hit or whatever it is, way before the sirens turn on. What did you hear?
Well, we just were aware that there was a loud noise that we heard while we were in the store on the other side of the road. And then we could sort of get the sensation of a bit of commotion outside, but it wasn't really till we got outside that we saw ambulances starting to arrive and police starting to arrive just a few moments later. So it sort of built very gradually, because at first we just thought, well, this is just a minor car accident. But then we began to realize that there's far more incidents further up the street, and that this is a much bigger scene than we'd imagined in the beginning.
Yeah, if they're predicting that it was going somewhat 90 miles an hour, there was a lot of stuff strewn around that was just bowled over by this vehicle.
Yeah, a lot of debris strewn up the street. So the picture emerged very slowly for us. It wasn't like we thought, oh, we know it's happening immediately. It really was something which emerged.
When they cordoned, the second wave of first responders came in and they cordoned off all of the area, we were in the center of it. And that was when, I got a phone call from a friend who was an ex-military helicopter pilot, was in Afghanistan, and he was just calling to say hello. And I told him what had happened. And his first words out of his mouth were, get behind a tree, get behind something that can protect you, because if there's a second wave of something, if it is an attack, they're distracting with one and they might do another. So take cover. So that's why when I was doing some of the videos, I was down by a tree and hidden behind a large cement thing. But it's what goes through your head, what we continue to talk about, and we've talked about it numerous times today, is the fact that those people who just went to either go to the bank in the morning, get a coffee, have their breakfast, they went to the kids walking to school, people maybe shopping before they went to work, and this happened. I know they're trying to stay away from the word terrorist, but there's that person terrorized those people, deliberately targeted them. And I know the investigation is being done, but we saw what that person did, and there's no way that was an accident.
Well, you've made that really, really clear, and it's a compelling eyewitness account for which we thank you both very much indeed. John Barrowman and Scott Gill, thanks for your time, really appreciate it. Sarah Elliott's alongside me. Officially, it's not terror. Officially, it may yet be an accident, but there is, according to Bild, the best-selling newspaper in Germany, a note in the car confessing. Is it a claim of responsibility? We don't know yet. But the point that John Barrowman was making there, and we've heard this time and time and time again, is that idea that people are going about their everyday business and suddenly the scene totally changes.
Exactly, and that is terrorizing in and of itself. So whether it's not Islamic terror, it's still an act of terror, if you ask me. It's very sad. It reminds me of the Waukesha, Wisconsin Christmas parade, where a man drove in that with the intention to kill. He did kill. He's in jail for life now. But it was a Christmas parade with young children, and then you have to worry about something like this, like a crazy driver. And
We've actually, I mean, look, we don't know whether it is terrorism, but coincidentally, we had booked, and we are having a debate a little later on this hour, related to the London Bridge attack, different type of terror attack, and what people should do in those circumstances. That relates to the fact that one of the people who did resist was a have-a-go hero, lost his life tackling the terrorists, is in the process perhaps have been canonised by the Catholic Church. So we'll talk about that a little later on this hour. But just to reiterate that point, officially at least, the German police are not saying yet whether it's an accident. They simply do not know, and they are nor are they saying whether it's terrorism. If they do know, they're not letting on at this stage. Well, at least during lockdown, we had an excuse for not travelling anywhere. Who do we blame now? We could start with the rail unions. While we were on air yesterday, you might remember, regular viewers and listeners, the RMT union announced Britain's first national rail strike for a generation. If you thought that when the train can't take the strain, maybe the plane could, you'll have to think again. Heathrow's boss today said it could take 18 months for British aviation to return to full capacity. Well, surely when planes and trains fail, you can fall back on the automobile. Well, you can, of course, but it will come at a cost. Yesterday, the biggest single jump in the price of petrol in 17 years, filling up the average tank of diesel. Already through the £100 barrier, petrol poised now to follow suit. Oh dear, what a triple whammy. Tim Jeans is the director of Newquay Airport and the former boss of Monarch as well. Tim, thanks for your time. On the point about 18 months till normality, does that feel about right to you?
Well, I think the new normal is just not going to be the same as the old normal. So I think what the boss of Heathrow was trying to say was the volume of people travelling won't recover for at least 18 months. And some believe it may be even longer than that. But I think what your listeners and viewers will be concerned about is our flights going to be disrupted in the way that we've seen in the last couple of weeks for the next 18 months. And the answer to that is no, they won't. What we've seen is massive stress on the system caused by a very, very rapid recovery in passenger numbers. And the airports, airlines and ground handlers simply weren't ready in terms of their staffing numbers. At least the majority were not. But it does mean that there is a massive recruitment, security vetting, training process underway as we speak. And although I can't guarantee, I would be pretty certain that the sort of delays, disruption and chaos that we've seen won't be repeated beyond really the middle of this summer.
So that idea, Tim, perhaps, that people just need to manage their expectations this summer when they arrive at an airport, and maybe we can talk a little bit about the fact that I'm guessing the bigger the airport, the bigger the potential problems, but that idea that they adjust their expectations, expecting perhaps there to be a problem, expecting perhaps to get a last-minute cancellation. You think that idea is perhaps a little overblown?
Yes, I do. I think that most airlines, understanding the crewing issues that they've got, are cancelling flights in advance, sometimes up to a month in advance. So hopefully the days of cancellation on the day, people turning up to the airport and finding their flight is cancelled, hopefully those will be gone very soon. Some airlines have definitely done better than others. As you say, some airports have been far more congested and troublesome than others. But in the main, as you say, the bigger airports have struggled, again, with the staffing issues of security staff, of ground handling staff, and you only need one of those elements to fall down just a bit, and that leads to a delayed departure. You need a pretty seamless chain of supply, both of check-in staff, security staff, your ground handlers, and then obviously your air crew. All of those need to perform pretty seamlessly for an on-time departure. The vast majority of flights, let's not forget, are departing on time, but they, yes, we have at least 5% which are not.
And it's tough if you're one of those 5% on one of those planes, isn't it? Tim Jeans, thanks so much for your time and your perspective. Really appreciate it. Sarah Elliott's alongside me here. You're going to a posh do tonight, aren't you? So, marking 40 years since Ronald Reagan, former American president, addressed both houses of Parliament, the first American head of state so to do. He famously / infamously, when faced with problems with the airlines, sacked all the pilots.
Yeah, he basically said to the union, if you're not going to show up for work, you're going to lose your job. And overnight, he sacked 13,000 Federal Aviation Administrative Union members.
Interesting lesson if you're thinking about the train strike that's coming up in June,
yes,
or not. Rather more pertinently, and we will talk about, let me plant this seed in your mind right now. I want you to think, and give us your answer a little later on, what would a tax-cutting president like Ronald Reagan, who I think in 1981 cut taxes, income tax by...
86.
86. 20%.
Yeah, well, the income rate was 70%. So the highest income tax rate was 70%.
And he cut it to 50?
Yeah.
Okay.
He cut it to 40, I think.
Wow. Well, let's come back to that when we talk about the cost of living crisis. We talk about little else here on this news channel at the moment. And this is sort of allied to that story. Levelling up. Levelling up has been described as little more than a slogan in a report from Parliament's Public Accounts Committee. Those MPs said ministers had made up their minds about which areas would get taxpayers' cash before shortlisted bids from councils were subsequently considered. The Labour MP, Meg Hillier, is the chair of the Public Accounts Committee, who joins us now. Meg Hillier, welcome to you. Just a slogan, you say?
Well, that's right. We keep seeing this with regeneration funding. We've seen a number of headline slogans, the Levelling Up Fund, the Towns Fund, the High Streets Fund, but underneath, very little analysis of what they're actually delivering. And that's a real problem. This is taxpayers' money after all, and the government should be spending it very wisely, and we're not really seeing the results.
To what do we say? Sorry, it's a bit windy on College Green, isn't it? What do we say to those people who look? I mean, the funds may be misdirected, but at least it's the right parts of the country that are getting some funds.
Look, I mean, everyone thinks. I don't think I've met anyone who doesn't think that we need to have a better and more equal economy across the UK, and that some areas have been left behind. But the key thing is you've got to know what you're spending the money on and what you're trying to get for it. So the government says it wants to see economic development. For most of us, that means actually real jobs, long-term jobs. But it has no measures for measuring that. It's not going to measure the number of jobs. And in some cases, the money's gone to places that didn't bid for it because of the way that was particularly the Towns Fund that was set up. And then there's a wrangling about what it should be spent on. And I'm all for civic pride initiatives. But if you're saying it's about creating economic development, I don't think doing something that just improves a little bit of the town centre necessarily drives that improvement. And we're saying you've got to evaluate this. And that's a boring word, but actually if it's any of us spending our own money will want to know what we're going to get in return for spending that money. And it's just the same when the government's spending taxpayers' money. It's even more important because it's taxpayers.
Well, I'm so glad you made that point, because I just fell into my own trap. I'm forever lambasting people when they talk about government money and saying, actually, there's no such thing. It's taxpayers' money, isn't it? You say sometimes, you suggested, I'm not sure you emphatically said it, but you suggested that perhaps sometimes the money's going to places it doesn't deserve to go to. I was just talking to our Anglo-American guest here, who would recognise the phrase pork barrel politics from American politics, by which I mean sometimes the money goes to where it's needed as a matter of political expediency and not much else. Is that what you're saying?
Well, when we looked at, in 2020, actually, a while ago, we looked at the Towns Fund. We were very concerned because within this country, we've never really had a big tradition of pork barrel politics. There would be criteria set by an independent civil service, and then people would bid and they would get it. You'd have winners and you'd have losers. Some might feel sorely about that, but you could at least say why people had got the money and why people had failed. They'd get feedback, and there's been very little feedback. And there was the Towns Fund particularly that came up with a list of names, and then ministers sat down in Whitehall and decided, knowing the names of the areas, which areas to give the money to. And some very odd decisions came out of that. And, really, I'm very clear, the best place to make decisions about how to improve the economy in an area is in the local area or in the region. And we shouldn't be deciding it all from Whitehall. It was almost on a whim, and I've looked in detail at the private papers as well. Very little record of why those decisions were made. So I've had people from all parties and none say to me, well, my area lost out, why? And they're cross about it because they don't really know why. And that transparency is absolutely vital if we're going to have trust in government to spend our money.
Meg Hillier, thanks very much indeed. Appreciate your time. Thanks very much indeed. Sarah Elliott's alongside me. Wasn't it nice to hear the church bells during lockdown? It's one of the things I missed the most, the sound of pealing bells.
Yes, and I also like seeing Big Ben again.
OK. So, pork barrel politics, you might have something to say about that. It's not a phrase that we use much in this country.
It's actually pork barrel spending.
Pork barrel, thank you. Thanks for the correction. Have you had time to think about what Ronald Reagan would do with our shattered economy right now?
Oh, well, he inherited an economy much like what we're going to have or what we're experiencing now in 1980, and he put the real tight screws on monetary policy, which meant you have to raise interest rates. And we had a very deep recession in 1981 to 1982. It was the worst recession since the Great Depression at that time.
It was bad here and it was bad there, wasn't it? It was just as bad here.
And you know what? But it takes time. Then the economy and the marketplace started to fix itself, right? But you deregulate, you do cut taxes, you slow down government spending, because that is the big reason why we're experiencing these inflationary costs, is because of the COVID spending. And it was out of control. It was like the money tree. And when you have too much money chasing too few goods, prices go up.
Anybody just tuning in wondering why we're talking about Ronald Reagan? Because it's 40 years ago today that he addressed both Houses of Parliament, the first American president to address both Houses of Parliament. One final question before we leave Ronald Reagan behind. Sarah Elliott, if the answer is impossible to articulate on daytime television, why was he called the Gipper?
The Gipper, I think that was because he played a character in a movie, which I think was the title, The Gipper.
I think you're right. I think you're exactly right. Brilliant. Thanks very much indeed. Coming up next, we'll bring you the rest of the day's news, and we'll be reflecting on have-a-go heroes in the company of a former SAS trooper. News next.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio. On digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
(29:04). The Prime Minister has been urged to cut taxes to save his premiership by fiscally conservative Tory MPs. They're unhappy with the high tax burden, what is it, highest in 70 years, and the level of government spending. Taxpayer spending, it's your money. One of those calling on the PM to slash tax bills, the Health Secretary, Sajid Javid. I'll be referring to him later in a less complimentary way. He said this morning that he'd like to see the government, quote, do more on tax cuts. Helen Thomas is the chief exec of Blonde Money. Helen, welcome to you. Tax cuts, people get excited about the idea of having more money, more of their money to play with. But a tax cut to make a difference to the economy would have to have a quantum, well, we can't afford it, can we?
Well, you hit the nail on the head there of, can we afford it? What should we be doing? And this is a huge, huge argument, not just for the Conservative Party, of course, but for the country. What is it that we really need the government to be doing to deal with the economic challenges ahead? And now, here's the thing. We have just been talking about Ronald Reagan, of course, there, which I'm sure many viewers will remember fondly in the 1980s. And, of course, with Maggie on this side of the pond.
Because they're too young.
Well, I remember those days very fondly, I must say. But I think what we have to appreciate is that is history. We are in a completely different kind of world now and a really different economy. And the crises we've had, not just the pandemic, but now a war, we have not seen where this economy is going to land. And that's why actually it makes it, tax cuts are kind of mucking around at the edges. We need to figure out what's the economy going to look like and what do we want it to be doing to be more productive.
Helen, am I naive to suggest that principle comes into it? Does principle not come into it at all? I mean, the principle being that actually you should retain as much of your hard-earned cash as possible. The government ought to only take it off you in extremis.
Well, of course, that is one of the underlying philosophies about tax. But when we come to the reality of how do you put that ideology into practice, we've got to prioritise. This is why things are so difficult right now, because the huge amount of borrowing that happened over these last 2 years, what are we going to do about it? Now, we might decide that we're happy with it, that we're still in an emergency, that we haven't got to the other side yet. But there are some people out there who will say, no, done and dusted. I want us to get back to where we were before, and these are my guiding principles. So I think principle comes into it. But, you know, you have to look at the reality. And at the moment, it's so hard politically because there's no easy answer. This is a very
no, you're right, and we shouldn't be in the business of facile answers to complicated questions. However, I'm going to bring in Sarah Elliott for some thoughts from that American perspective in a second. However, I got a huge Helen mailbag, relatively big mailbag last week when we talked about the fact that diesel bills, for the average diesel car, it was going to cost you £100 now to fill up. And when people realised that of that £100, £45 goes straight to tax coffers, that they were outraged. And the point is, they didn't know.
Yeah, so here's the thing. Tax cuts, what do we mean? Would it be better looking at something like VAT on necessities rather than income tax? Now, you talk about philosophy. Here's the question. When you want to give people more of their money back, are you going to tax their productive earnings, or are you going to tax them at the point of consumption? And there's nothing more than, more necessary than, of course, fuel. So look, I think rather than just sort of talking about tax cuts and income tax cuts, let's look at something like VAT. Could we say the first £500 of your energy bill should be free of VAT? Let's get creative.
Yeah, I mean, Sarah Elliott, I'm not going to make it as boiled down as what would Ronald Reagan do, but it sometimes feels that we're tinkering at the edges, where actually what we need is clarity and a big bold statement. What say you?
I agree. And actually, I think Ronald Reagan's policies are timeless. They worked under the Trump administration to get the economy moving. Right now, we've seen how fast we've bounced back from COVID. Let's encourage this bounce back. Let's keep going. And to do so, you need to talk about which tax cuts are actually going to influence behavior, like job creation. Which ones are the entrepreneurs are going to take more risks to hire people? How can we raise wages? So I think, you're right on, Helen, in one sense. We need to think about which taxes to cut, because it will stimulate behavior. It will influence decision-making. And, I think we need to get more people off the dole and back into work. And the airline industry is a great example of that.
Sarah Elliott, Helen Thomas, thanks both very much indeed for your thoughts. We're going to bring you the rest of the day's news now. Stand by.
Good afternoon. It's 35 minutes past 4. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister told MPs he's getting on with his job as he faced the Commons for the first time since surviving Monday's confidence vote in his leadership. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer challenged Boris Johnson on the NHS and said that when the Prime Minister falls short, he changes the rules and...
Pretending no rules were broken didn't work. Pretending the economy is booming didn't work. And pretending to build 40 new hospitals won't work either. They want him to change, but he can't.
But what we're doing more fundamentally is doing what the people of this country can see is simple common sense, and that is using our economic strength to invest in doctors and nurses and get people on the wards, get people, giving people their scans and their screens and their tests in a more timely manner, and taking our NHS forward.
Unite Union members at Transport for London and London Underground say they'll also strike on the 21st of this month. That's the same day as a walkout by the RMT. It comes after the Prime Minister labelled the industrial action as reckless and unwanted. RMT members will walk out on the 21st, 23rd and 25th of June, which they're calling the biggest strike on the railways since 1989. A Berlin politician says placards relating to Turkey have been found in the car of a man who allegedly drove into a crowd of people, killing one person. Germany's Bild newspaper says the victim was a teacher who'd been with a group of her school students. Police say more than a dozen people have been injured. 6 have life-threatening injuries. The 29-year-old German-Armenian driver has been detained. The UK's Crown Prosecution Service has authorised indecent assault charges against Hollywood film producer Harvey Weinstein. The 70-year-old faces 2 counts of indecent assault against a woman between July and August of 1996. The decision follows a review of evidence gathered during a Met Police investigation. The force says the woman is now in her 50s. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Back to Brazier in just a moment.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Well, here's today's markets as they currently stand. The pound is 1.255 to the dollar and 1.169 to the euro. And the price of gold currently stands at £1,480 and 59 pence per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you. And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
This morning, Sajid Javid said he no longer sees the role of the NHS as just about saving lives. It must also nag people before they become patients. His latest wheeze, I choose my word carefully, is to raise the age at which someone can legally smoke to 21. Not confirmed yet, but very likely to happen. It has backing from the usual suspects, the anti-smoking lobby groups who, rather than disband and find other jobs, keep on discovering that there's actually lots of work left to do. Who'd have thunk it? They got their way on bans in pubs and clubs and offices and factories and trains and planes and pretty much anywhere, short of your own home, where it looked like people might be enjoying a cheeky fag. And now a new tactic, not entirely new in fact, New Zealand. That beacon of lockdown liberty recently said anyone born after 2008 could never legally buy tobacco. The anti-smoking lobby, having fought to limit smoking by location, is now making it about your generation. You may be able to become a soldier or have sex at 16. At 17, you can drive a car. Until Nicola Sturgeon succeeds in extending the franchise to toddlers, voting is a privilege normally awarded to someone turning 18. So I make 21 the age at which someone can smoke. Are we saying, as I think we must be, that it's only at that age that someone can make an informed decision? As a society, we would be saying a teenager is mature enough to decide their gender, but too immature to decide to make a rollie. The coherent solution would be to declare one age when someone is old enough to judge risk. The risk of getting pregnant, the risk of getting shot wearing the Queen's uniform, the risk of voting into power Nicola Sturgeon or buying a beer to forget you ever did so. But imagine the uproar there'd be if Sajid Javid announced that because the NHS spends billions cleaning up the mess of excessive alcohol consumption, you'd have to turn 21 before having a legal drink. Hey, legal is the key word here. Whenever we prohibit things, especially things many folk believe should be lawful, we force activity underground. And the stigma of breaking the law loses a bit more of its moral authority. There's a principle at stake too. People have the right, this is uncomfortable, people, in my view, have the right to destroy themselves if that's what they want to do. This week, a 52-year-old Northern Irishman became the third fatality at this year's Isle of Man road race. More than 260 riders have died since the events began in 1911. The competitors, they know exactly what risks they're taking. They've made a calculation the state has no right to interfere with, that true fulfilment sometimes involves danger. Increasingly, the state is infuriated by the idea that it can't tell people how to live. As with lockdown, it loves to say, your vice is bad for others, so stop it. If you don't wear a mask, you might give someone COVID. If you use tobacco, you punish passive smokers. Raising the age at which someone can choose to smoke in their own home, a million miles away from anyone else, isn't about protecting others. It's about infantilization. Sajid Javid and the other grown-ups will decide when it's safe for you to play. Sarah Elliott's my studio guest today. Ever been a smoker?
No, I tried it at university. I liked menthols, but I gave it up because it's not healthy.
No, me too. I enjoyed smoking, gave it up at 30, and don't regret it at all. Not one of those social smokers. I couldn't have one or a couple at the end of an evening like some people do. But I absolutely would go to the wall for the right for people to do a perfectly, as at the moment, legal vice.
Absolutely. I mean, you can own a gun at 18, you can serve your country, you can drink a beer, you can't have a cigarette. You know, come on. I mean, I had to wait till I was 21 to have my first legal beer. That was a bit late, I must say.
Do you get my point that with children especially, with teenagers even more so, if you make more and more things that they want to do illegal, you just take away that slightly sacred aspect of the law. You know, the law is just something to dodge.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, there become so many laws that you can't keep track of all of them. And like you said, it goes to underground activity, or people are breaking the law and they don't realize it. But I think there has to be personal responsibility, and I'm sorry if the state doesn't like it. You know, like, I think smoking rates are going down. It is less fashionable. When I came to the UK 9 years ago, most of my friends were smoking at the pub. Now they're not.
They've just got older.
Yeah. I mean, and you have children, you make different decisions. I just think the lobby really wants to outlaw cigarettes, and this is just them just postponing the ultimate acts. And I think that we should fight for our rights, as you say, to destroy ourselves if we so choose. Yeah. I mean, we need some personal responsibility.
This isn't just some abstract debate. I read this is a conversation in Cabinet right now.
Yeah.
There are those people who say, what? You know, let people decide. You can't tell people that they can't be doing something legal until they're 21. And it seems that Sajid Javid and others say, oh, yes, we can.
Yeah, I mean, this is not a small state conservative government, is it?
Increasingly, no.
Can you imagine, like, Margaret Thatcher talking about this with her, you know, cabinet?
In a smoke-filled room.
Yes, jog on, mate, she'd say.
OK, Sarah, thanks very much indeed. It's time for our debate very shortly. In fact, now, the family of a man who died after using his skateboard to fight off one of the attackers at the 2017 London Bridge terror attacks is campaigning for him to be canonised as a saint with the backing of the Roman Catholic Church. This is the case of Ignacio Echeverria, who was passing through Borough Market near London Bridge when he saw a man attacking a police officer and then a woman. The 39-year-old banker used his skateboard to fight off the attacker and distracted him as other people fled to safety. He was stabbed twice in the back by a third terrorist, later dying of his wounds. Our question then, would you be a have-a-go hero? Former Detective Chief Superintendent at the Met, Kevin Hurley, joins us, as does former SAS trooper Phil Campion. Gentlemen, we appreciate your time. Thanks very much indeed. Kevin Hurley, I know we've talked about things like this before. If it comes down to that awful choice in the moment, what should people do?
Well, I'd be guided by this. All that's required for evil to succeed is for good people to do nothing. So the bottom line on it, if you're in that kind of situation, the government teaches run, hide, tell. I don't agree. I would do what so many other people did, I hope, in that incident, including this brave person, and take them on. Because if you don't take these people on, you are definitely going to die if they catch you. I think it's always a judgment call for people. They know what they're capable of, what they think they do, they make the risk. But my view on this is, if someone is offending in front of you, assaulting an innocent person, a terrorist attack, get stuck in hard if you think you can do it. But if you can't, run away or call for others to help you. Because if you don't take these people out, they will go on and kill you. But it's a judgment call. If you don't think you can manage it and you're not up for it, don't. But in the end, it comes in the individual.
Phil Campion, when I think back to terror attacks, there was the one at Glasgow Airport. Do you remember that? There was a baggage handler who made all the difference by getting stuck in.
Right. There's two things you've got to take into consideration here. And one of them is scientific, and you can do nothing about it, right? It's called the fight or flight or fright, right? When you're completely in a situation which is going to stand you up, which is going to put you in stressful, acute stress response is what it's called. And basically how it works is you will either run away or you will fight naturally, okay? Or you will freeze. And there's nothing you will ever do about that, okay? All the training in the world, you'll either fight, flight, or you'll freeze. And there's very, very little you'll do to... So if you understand how your body works, that's a good thing, okay? The other thing to take into consideration is if you do decide to step into the breach, if you do decide to take someone on, that decision could be the last decision you ever take, okay? So it's very important before you start getting involved as a have-a-go hero, you understand a little bit about how you work. Now, if you've never been in a situation when you've had a fight before, you won't know. And some people will be naturally driven towards violence, danger, aggression. And some people I've come across before say, God, I didn't think I had it in me. I actually went forward. Well, that's because you haven't got a choice. Your body is programmed. You have an adrenal medulla in you, which will release what they call a concoction of all sorts of chemicals into your body, which will determine whether you stay, whether you go, or whether you just stand there and freeze. And outside of that, there's not a lot you can do. But if you are capable, if you are trained and you can have a go, get yourself in there. Even if you're not trained and you think you can do something about it, do something about it. But if you can't, just remember in the back of your head, if you make the wrong decision, it could be the last decision you ever make.
Kevin Hurley, thankfully, most of us never have to face this decision. I'm pretty sure I'd be a coward if it really came to it. But what I hope I wouldn't be is a voyeur. And I think back to that awful situation 5-6 years ago. I think it was Walthamstow Tube Station. A young man, Islamist, but possibly mental health problems. One guy took him on and was grappling with him on the floor. I think he was a plumber. whilst other people stood around with their smartphones filming it. It's one thing not to be a hero, it's another thing to be vicariously recording it for other people's consumption.
Yeah, I mean, this is unfortunate. I think your other guest is right. You know, if you think you can do something and you're prepared to, get stuck in. But standing around videoing, well, it's just an unfortunate side of life. If this kind of stuff happens and you're not going to get stuck in, get out of the way, run and call for help. But I really do say to people, and I'm not even talking about terrorism, but, you know, if there are yobs on the train, troubling women or other kids on the train, and you're there, you're a man, a couple of adult women as well, and you say, look, let's sort these people out. If you think you can do it, but you have to understand that when you get engaged in a fight with people, there's no half measures. You're either all in or you don't do it, because you take some of these people on and they know how to do violence. So you better be prepared to start steaming hard yourself.
Kevin Hurley, Phil Campion, there we have to leave it, but it's a thought-provoking conversation and one we might have again. Gentlemen, thanks both very much indeed. Sarah Elliott alongside me, just for a brief thought on this one. I think Kevin Hurley there talked about what is the Home Office advice in this country, and I'm talking about a terrorist attack now, not just, you know, a crime that's been committed, do I decide to get involved, but a terror attack. Home Office advice is run, hide, tell, phone somebody. Your country, the Department for Homeland Security, well, your old country, the advice in America in the event of a terrorist attack is, do you know?
No, I don't.
Run, hide, fight. Interesting distinction, no?
Yes, and sounds about right. Yeah.
And we've seen it happen. You think back to that, the TARLIS, the high-speed train from Brussels to Paris a few years ago. There was an Islamist terrorist trying to kill as many people as possible in train carriage.
Yeah.
He hadn't reckoned on the fact there were a couple of former US servicemen who proceeded to kick 7 bells out of him.
Yeah, and you hear it all the time. There was a woman who had her handgun with her, her legal handgun with her, that stopped a shooter at a graduation ceremony in West Virginia. There was also someone who stopped a shooter at a church in Texas. This idea of self-defense and being able to protect your property and also your neighbor is very central to who we are and how we understand liberty and ourselves in America. Also, you have to remember, which I don't think many Brits understand, it's a huge country. But police are often maybe 20 minutes away, 30 minutes away. You have to be able to, like, tuck in and defend yourself.
That's a really good point. It's a big country. Sarah, for now, thanks very much indeed. 5 to 5, we're discussing 5 things you might want to know before 5 o'clock. At 5, the number of migrants crossing the English Channel this year has now passed the 10,000 mark. The total is more than double the number crossing during the same period last year. The figures come as the government says it's still planning to fly dozens of asylum seekers to Rwanda, despite the launch of a High Court action to block the move. The lawyers are busy. At 4, the US actor Matthew McConaughey has delivered an address at the White House on his calls for responsible gun legislation, as he put it. His speech follows the mass shooting in Texas last month, where students and teachers perished. This is part of what he had to say.
We heard from so many people, right? Families of the deceased, mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, Texas Rangers, hunters, Border Patrol, and responsible gun owners who won't give up their Second Amendment right to bear arms. And you know what they all said? We want secure and safe schools, and we want gun laws that won't make it so easy for the bad guys to get these damn guns.
At 3, government figures suggest average petrol prices could hit a record high of 175.6p by next week and could rise to £2 per litre later this summer. Petrol prices up 6p on last week, the average for diesel up by nearly 4p. At 2, the UK government says it's not currently considering copying European Union plans for a common charging cable. The EU has provisionally agreed all new portable electronic devices must, by 2024, use a USB-type charger, a move it says will benefit consumers. Critics, including Apple, say it will stifle innovation. At 1, a study suggests people with a glass-half-full approach to life will live healthier, longer lives. Scientists found that while optimists reacted to and recovered from stressful situations in much the same way as pessimists, the optimists fared better emotionally because they had fewer stressful events in their daily lives. 5 things you might want to know before 5 o'clock this afternoon. Sarah Elliott's alongside me. Matthew McConaughey, wasn't he great in True Detective and Interstellar? What's he got to tell us about you, not us? It's 5,000 miles away, not my country, Gov.
Right.
Why is he getting involved in gun laws?
Because I think he's a Texan and he believes in gun rights, but he also kind of straddles the liberal universe of Hollywood. So he thinks that he has some credibility with the left and he has some credibility with the right. So I think he's trying to be a peacemaker, a mediator here, coming up with some ideas. I have to agree with him. I think we do need to have better laws to keep those who are unstable and have mental health problems further away from obtaining guns, or at least having their constitutional rights suspended temporarily. Perhaps these are called red flag laws. They're for people who are mentally unwell, who have suicidal thoughts, could be a danger to the community. Somebody can go to a judge and make a case to suspend their constitutional right temporarily. So I think that might be a way in which we can prevent a lot of these mentally ill people from creating mass murder.
OK, Sarah, for now, thanks very much indeed. Just time for 2 emails. Levelling Up, we've been talking about it. Esme writes, the Wirral has received £250 million from the government. Birkenhead is being completely transformed, including the docks. No one here is complaining. Clive on rail, very long email. I'm going on permanent personal rail strike myself. From now on, I refuse to travel by rail. It's incredibly expensive, slow in the car and unreliable. More to come.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hi, they're coming up live at 5. At least one person has died and around 30 others are injured. This after a car drove into a crowd. Well, the car was driven into a crowd in Berlin this morning before crashing through a shop window. Not clear yet whether the driver intentionally drove into the crowd, although a German newspaper is reporting that a confession letter had been found inside the car. The city's state interior minister is instead saying that placards were apparently discovered in the car. Either way, former head of counter-terror at the Ministry of Defence, Chip Chapman, joins me next. Also, inflation hitting farmers' pockets hard. Prices for fuel and grain reaching record highs. Also struggling to recruit staff, despite more than 5 million people claiming out-of-work benefits. At the last count, a figure as big as the population of Scotland. We'll discuss that with the landowner and columnist Jamie Blackett. And 40 years ago today, Ronald Reagan became the first American president to address both houses of Parliament. His Westminster speech created a stir at the time. I'll discuss with Reagan fan Maria Murphy. And with me for the next 2 hours, spokeswoman for Republicans Overseas UK, who's also got a view on Ronald Reagan, Sarah Elliott. But first, the latest news headlines with Ray.
Thanks, Colin. It's 1 minute past 5. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. Boris Johnson has faced questions in the Commons for the first time since surviving Monday's confidence vote, telling MPs he's getting on with the job. Although the Prime Minister won the vote, 41% of his own party said they had no confidence in him. The vote was prompted by the Sue Gray report into lockdown parties, but MPs are also unhappy with legislation to override the Northern Ireland Protocol and high taxes. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer challenged Boris Johnson on the NHS and said that when the PM falls short, he changes the rules and lowers the bar.
Pretending no rules were broken didn't work. Pretending the economy is booming didn't work. And pretending to build 40 new hospitals won't work either. They want him to change, but he can't.
But what we're doing more fundamentally is doing what the people of this country can see is simple common sense, and that is using our economic strength to invest in doctors and nurses and get people on the wards, get people, giving people their scans and their screens and their tests in a more timely manner and taking our NHS forward.
Members of the Unite Union at Transport for London and London Underground have announced that they also will strike on the 21st of this month. That's the same day as a walkout by the RMT. It comes after the Prime Minister labelled the industrial action as reckless and unwanted. The RMT plans to walk out on the 21st, 23rd and 25th of June, which they're calling the biggest strike on the railways since 1989. The planned strikes coincide with Glastonbury Festival and the Test match cricket. The Independent's travel editor, Simon Calder, says the dispute is between the unions and the government.
The union is betting that, yes, they can shut down the country. The government is thinking, hang on, we've probably got enough people who we can rely on, and people, of course, not needing to commute in the same numbers as they did before. We are probably going to see not a fully effective strike. So I think the first 3 days of strikes are going to go ahead, and then there will be some talks after that. But I'm kind of bedding in for a long summer of discontent, I'm afraid.
A Berlin politician says placards relating to Turkey have been found in the car of a man who allegedly drove into a crowd of people on purpose, killing one person. Germany's Bild newspaper says the victim was a teacher who had been with a group of her school children in the west of the capital. The 29-year-old German-Armenian driver has been detained. Police say more than a dozen people have been injured. 6 have life-threatening injuries. Actor John Barrowman happened to be in the area at the time. He told GB News what he saw.
One person was thrown onto a stretcher and other people were being CPR'd and treated, but it was carnage. We didn't find out until today that it was across the street where the Christmas market stuff had happened, but there were bollards all over the place to protect people from the cars, but the car was going so fast, one of those bollards exploded and all over the road.
The Home Office says it's still planning to fly dozens of asylum seekers to Rwanda, despite campaigners launching High Court action to block the move. The Public and Commercial Services Union, Care for Calais and Detention Action say lawyers have sought a judicial review of the scheme. They're challenging what they describe as an unlawful policy by the Home Office to send asylum seekers to the East African nation. The first flight carrying 130 migrants is due to leave next Tuesday. The UK's Crown Prosecution Service has authorised indecent assault charges against Hollywood film producer Harvey Weinstein. The 70-year-old faces 2 counts of indecent assault against a woman between July and August of 1996. The decision follows a review of evidence gathered during a Met Police investigation. The force says the woman is now in her 50s. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get back to Brazier.
6 minutes past 5, fair bit of news around this afternoon. At least one person has died and several injured after a car drove into a crowd in West Berlin, or was driven into a crowd in West Berlin and crashed subsequently into a shop window. It's not yet known if the incident was intentional, at least that's the official story, but the driver of the car has been identified as a 29-year-old German-Armenian man. A Germany's Bild newspaper claims an apparent confession letter has been found in the car. However, the city's state interior minister has denied those reports, instead saying that placards were discovered in the vehicle. The incident, there's some context to this that may or may not be relevant. The incident took place in a part of the capital, popular with tourists, and yards away from the scene of the 2016 terror attack, which saw a dozen fatalities when a Tunisian Islamic State radical used a lorry to mow down pedestrians at a Christmas market. Joining us now, the former head of counter-terror at the Ministry of Defence, Major General Chip Chapman. Chip Chapman, welcome to you. Clearly the Germans, in common with many other governments when there's an incident like this, are very, very hesitant about what they release as a matter of on-the-record public information. It may turn out to be not what people suspect it is. That we've seen that happen before. We'll park those caveats and talk, if we may, about the report suggesting some sort of letter or, more likely, placards have been found in the vehicle. What do you make of that?
Well, you can have mixed or single-issue terrorism, and if he's a German-Armenian, and given the relationship between Armenia and Turkey, that would be an avenue that you could say had some credibility outside the things that we might all jump to a conclusion with for AQ or IS. So there can be that mixed motivation. It's difficult to see at the moment with the evidence we've got that this is a terrorist attack. It's obviously a deliberate incident. But like all these things, the way that we frame an issue can lead us to these conclusions. So, for example, because we know it was around the corner from the December 16 Berlin attack, then you can link the two together. And we do that in a thing called the availability heuristic. And you've got to be careful as an analyst, as I am, that you don't fall into the trap of confirmation bias and of framing bias and availability heuristics. So until you get the evidence, you can say that this was a deliberate incident. Whether it's a terrorist incident will be shown in time, because a terrorist incident in the UK under the Terrorism Act 2000 must have a religious, political, ideological or racial element to it.
All that thoroughly understood, Chip Chapman. When it comes to, I was listening to the eyewitness testimony of John Barrowman, an actor who found himself on the spot, seeing from a distance and listening from a distance at what happened. And one thing he noticed was that one of the bollards, which he suspected had been put up to preventing exactly this kind of incursion onto the pavement, had been knocked over. I mean, in terms of protecting the public from people who want to intend them harm using unconventional weapons, and anybody who's lived in Israel will see how if you can't get hold of a gun, you can get hold of a car or a knife to wound civilians, whatever the motivation is. But people like you have got to work out how to keep people safe whilst a city still works. So you can put up all the bollards you like, but how are people going to deliver food or material? It's that constant balancing act, isn't it, between keeping people safe and making a city work?
It is, and I would argue from what John Barrowman said that the vehicle mitigation measures largely worked. If you have a car going over 48 miles an hour, you have a 90% chance of dying. Now, there's only one dead at the moment. Normally in terrorist incidents that increases, so he could not have been going at a massive speed if only one person is killed at the moment. You are killed in a vehicle as a weapon attack from three things: either mass, the size of the vehicle. He had a Renault Clio, which is not the greatest terrorist act. Secondly, the angle of attack or speed. They are the three main variables in a vehicle as a weapon terrorist attack. So the vehicle mitigation measures largely worked with bollards. It could have been a lot worse if he'd have picked a target which was juicier than where he actually went.
Chip Chapman, thanks so much for your analysis, as ever. Really appreciate it, Chip Chapman there. Sarah Elliott's my studio guest for the rest of this hour. Chip Chapman knows wherever he speaks and will know things about conversations about keeping people safe in our city centres and vulnerable points, far more about it than
Can I just hear this player for a few minutes?
Oh, I thought he was chiming back in. It's your turn now, though, Sarah Elliott. There is that balance to be struck, isn't there, between keeping cities open and working and making sure that people can't do harm to others without obvious weapons.
Right, and in an increasingly dangerous world, it's getting harder and harder to make that balance, you know. And it's really devastating when you see children being targeted or hit, or a teacher, I think is the one killed in this case. I guess there's some positives that Chip Chapman left with us, is that it could have been a lot worse, that the bollards did seem to work, that there were some measures put into place that made it less deadly. But it's hard to think of the positives right now when you're still dealing with the immediate after effects.
It's also important, I think my 14-year-old is going to Berlin later this year. I remember after the Bataclan attack in Paris, and schools all over the UK were cancelling school trips to France, to the whole of France. It's also important to retain a sense of perspective.
Right.
I think Germany's got a population of 80 million people, one nutter in a car. You know,
right.
Keep it in perspective, right?
And the same with America. You know, we did see the nutter in Texas, but that's, again, it is exceptionally rare to have a school shooting in America.
Sarah, thanks very much. Now, the Prime Minister's been urged by his Conservative MPs to cut taxes to save his premiership after Monday's no-confidence vote. Senior Tories, some of them accusing Boris Johnson's government of being essentially unconservative because of tax increases and large levels of government spending. The Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, backed the calls, apparently, saying he'd like to see the government do more on tax cuts. Rare to find a politician who'd say tax cuts are unwelcome. Joining us now, the Chief Economic Advisor at the Centre for Economic and Business Research, Vicky Price. Vicky Price, welcome to you. We were just reflecting, Sarah Elliott and I, who's from Republicans overseas, so has got a perspective on American politics, on the fact that today is the 40th anniversary of the speech given to both houses of Parliament by one Ronald Reagan, who cut taxes, the highest rate of tax in America in the 1980s, from 70 to 50. To 50%. She's just guiding me off camera here. There's a practical element, you know, the idea that you get the trickle down, which we can discuss whether it works or not. But then there is the symbolic gesture of government saying, do you know what? We trust you to keep more of your own cash.
But it's really interesting when you look at the type of taxes that people are debating right now. So we talk about cutting taxes now, but of course, if you look at the corporation tax, for example, which is going up again next year to 25% from 19%, it had been coming down over a number of years very, very significantly. So there had been a long period, and some of it during the coalition government as well and thereafter, where we've been seeing, in fact, corporation tax get dropped year after year practically, and we reached the point where at 19% it was pretty low by international standards, and obviously one needed to start raising a little bit more cash, particularly after all the support schemes that were introduced during COVID. And now, of course, the intention is to raise it. So we've seen something similar happen with the national insurance contributions. So we are in a situation right now where the government had been retrenching, if you like, taking away some of the fiscal stimulus. Understandably, you could argue, given the needs of the economy during COVID, and we've reached the point where we were growing quite strongly during 2021, and it looked like it made sense to take something back from the economy. Unfortunately, things have turned around quite badly for the government and for the economy, really, and for people who right now cannot make ends meet. And that's a real issue. And the question is, how can you do something without necessarily just throwing out the entire sort of plan, which is basically get back to some sort of fiscal normality in the future?
Because that fiscal normality is something many people in the Treasury will want to retain. And there we come to the rub, perhaps, don't we? That there is a political imperative at number 10, and there is a fiscal imperative at number 11. The political imperative is, let's have some tax cuts and save Boris's skin. If you're Rishi, your advisor is saying to you, don't spook the markets. If you want to cut taxes, you're going to have to borrow more money, and that's going to spook them.
Well, of course, Rishi Sunak has already said himself that he intends to cut taxes, or at least he hopes to do so, certainly by the time of the next election. So he's already hinted on one, actually two points cut before. And more recently, he said one. So he's obviously looked at what he can afford and decided, well, maybe because the economy is not doing that well, maybe I can't afford to cut the basic rate of income tax by 2 points. So he's talked about 1, but it's quite likely that they're holding something back to allow for that cut to take place. But the truth is that a lot of that fiscal gap that was there, this money put aside, if you like, because we were doing slightly better. Of course, we've been collecting much more tax from corporation tax, collecting more tax from VAT, people who had gone out and spent, and unemployment has fallen very significantly, so people were paying more income tax.
Wow.
So if you add all that together, you ended up with a bit of fiscal room that he could have deployed at some point in the future. Now that fiscal room is getting narrower and narrower, I'm afraid, and smaller, and that's going to be a real problem for them, even though politically, of course, it would make a lot of sense.
Vicky Price, good to talk to you. Appreciate your time. Thanks very much indeed. Sarah Elliott from Republicans Overseas, who's also going to a posh do tonight to commemorate the 40th anniversary of Ronald Reagan addressing both Houses of Parliament. I've already put to you the question, what would Ronald Reagan do to turn around the British economy? Tax if he were the man in charge, the Johnny on the spot. But Vicky Price just raises a point there about the number of vacancies, unemployment. We're about to debate it with somebody who's really unhappy. He says, I've got vacancies. I've got so many vacancies I can't fill. And yet we've got unemployment benefits going to more than 1 million people. Square that circle for me.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. It seems like people get more value out of the government dole than actually going to work. And so they don't see the need to go get a job if they can get more from the government, which I think is very upside down. We need to turn it around. We need people in the economy, and also for their own personal benefit. Work is good for the human soul. But, the other thing Ronald Reagan would say is, let's not spend like drunken sailors. Let's actually look at what we're spending our money on. Do we need to be sending all this money abroad? Do we need to be, paying for this center here or a bridge to nowhere here? And
well, not if you're Esme from the Wirral, who says the Wirral's received 250 million from the government. Birkenhead is being completely transformed, including the docks. No one here is complaining with levelling up.
Oh, there you go. Maybe that's well spent money.
There you go.
But you get my idea.
I do, Sarah, thanks very much. Coming up, we just touched on it, supplies of fruit and veg could be squeezed this summer due to a shortage of seasonal crop pickers, despite the fact that more than 1 million Brits, as Sarah was explaining, are claiming unemployment benefits. The columnist Jamie Blackett will share his experience. First, a look at the weather.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Further showers, even some thunderstorms for many of us through the rest of the day, but brighter spells will develop in places and it will turn drier later on. However, low pressure is in charge at the moment, that low pressure sitting just to the north of Northern Ireland, and it has brought a weather front north across the UK. That's effectively stalled in central Scotland, and just to the south of that, with light winds, some slow-moving showers and thunderstorms could cause some issues for southern Scotland, northeast England. A yellow warning in force here. Showers elsewhere will move through more quickly and die away during the evening. By the end of the night, just some remnants of the weather front there spilling into southwest Scotland and northwest England to give some dribs and drabs of rain. A lot of low cloud for eastern Scotland, northeast England to wake up to on Thursday. Brighter skies further south across much of the rest of England as well as Wales. Doesn't last in the west. I think for Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest, it turns cloudy and damp during the afternoon. The more persistent rain over western hills. It also turns increasingly breezy, and that will impact the temperatures. I think 16 or 17 Celsius at best, Cardiff and Plymouth. Still 20 there for Newcastle and Norwich, where it will be largely sunny. In the east of England, eastern Scotland seeing some showers, and the cloud and rain in the west during the evening does eventually push east, but it tends to fade away. And what's more notable, I think, during Thursday night and into the start of Friday is the wind. It will turn breezy across the board, but the winds will be particularly strong out towards the west of Scotland. And of course, with the keen breeze, temperatures will hold up, whether you've got clear skies or cloud to start off Friday. I think we're looking at low teens for most places. Some showery rain in the far southeast on Friday morning. Bright spells elsewhere, but further showers pushing into the north and northwest, and increasingly windy. Friday and Saturday, we're likely to see gales in western Scotland.
I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
we embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you. And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Some farmers are warning there could be a shortage of food on our shelves this summer. There's a lack of seasonal crop pickers. That's one of the potential reasons. Not the only problem facing farmers in the country. Inflation hitting pockets too. Prices for fuel and grain. And red diesel has more than doubled in price as well. Our East of England reporter sent this report from Holsall Farm in Colchester.
Along the Suffolk-Essex border is the village of Langham. George is one of Britain's young farmers determined to keep farming the land, feeding the nation and helping the industry grow. I caught up with George to try and understand why we are seeing a spike in food prices and what are the challenges facing farmers.
Probably the biggest challenge at the moment is fertiliser prices rising, but with the fertiliser prices, the end product prices has gone up as well because the input costs are going up. So fuel, fertiliser, labour, everything's going up.
On Holsall Farm they grow a number of crops like wheat, potatoes and sugar beet. George is a new breed of British farmer taking a focus on regenerative farming techniques which he believes will make British farming stronger in the future. Regenerative agriculture is a conservation and rehabilitation approach to food and farming systems. It focuses on topsoil regeneration, increasing biodiversity, enhancing ecosystem services and ultimately strengthening the health and vitality of the farm soil. Back at the farm, I asked George about seasonality. However, he would still be dependent on fertilisers, which have increased by more than 10% in the last 12 months to March. Feed wheat, a key component of raising livestock, has seen a 20% increase in the first 4 months of this year.
So some of the challenges in British beef farming is the rises in prices. So our fertiliser and fuel, etc. is going up. That is then producing food for them. And that's having a knock-on effect. That's why you're seeing rises in the supermarket, is because the price of beef is costing more to produce. So you're now seeing it in the supermarket.
So, George, there's a lot of people who say that Britain has become far too dependent on importing foods into the country rather than homegrown production. If we changed more to seasonal produce and seasonable vegetables, do you think that could be a positive change in the industry?
If we use seasonal veg, I think it would give farmers a diversity opportunity to grow different crops at different times of the year. I think it would be an important part to be self-sufficient. And I think that's important, especially with what's happened in the last 2, 3, 5 years with Brexit, Ukraine and COVID. I think we need to be more seasonal and local to survive these global events.
For George, his suckler herd is his pride and joy, but the viability of beef farming is becoming continuously stretched. With global fertiliser prices continuing to rise, it seems the knock-on effect on the farmer will continue to be felt by the consumers at the checkouts. For GB News, this is Ed Crawford.
Well, more than on the shortage of crop pickers threatening to stem the supply of fruit and veg to British shops this summer. It's a story we've heard before. What's new, I think, is the sense that many of us are seeing labour shortage feature in our everyday lives too, not just down on the farm. Examples, I went to a cafe recently, great food, lovely location. It was closing early every evening because they could not get the staff, just like lots of neighbouring businesses, I was told. Meanwhile, more than 1 million Brits are claiming unemployment benefits. How do we join this up? We're joined by the columnist, Jamie Blackett, who farms in the Borders. Jamie, welcome to you. You were tweeting yesterday that you see this weird correlation between the fact we've got more than 1 million vacancies, more than 1 million unemployed, but we know it's not as straightforward as just putting those two numbers together and everything being hunky-dory, don't we?
I think we do, Colin, and I think there needs to be sort of a combination of sticks and carrots and more money spent on training in the economy and a culture change as well. I think there are too many people probably want to go to university and end up in a white-collar job, possibly in the civil service, when actually there are great opportunities in agriculture. We're advertising at the moment for a young boy or girl to come onto our team. We're offering $22,000 starting salary. They needn't be a graduate. We give them a cottage to live in. We would take an 18-year-old if they were good enough. So that's actually quite a good starting salary for somebody that age. And we're not getting the applicants, because I think we have this culture now where agriculture is seen as dirty and low paid, and the school teachers are pushing people into university to go and work in the knowledge economy, when perhaps they might be better working with their hands and taking on an apprenticeship, something like that.
Jamie, here's a I was going to say stupid question, and it might well be. But there was a story yesterday suggesting that the 4-day working week, it was not just about working from home now, a 4-day working week is something which many people approve of as well. They might. Are we getting lazier?
Yes, I think we probably are. And I think COVID proved that, didn't it? The difficulty in getting people back to work. Our civil servants in Dumfries in the agriculture office actually have only really just gone back to working in the office. There is a culture now of working from home, but of course in agriculture you can get to do that anyway. You work from home, and we can be very flexible. You can actually work a 4-day week on a dairy farm because we work a shift system. The cows get milked twice a day, and if we had enough people sharing the work, then that's entirely possible. And I don't necessarily see a problem with that, but I think there's a real issue with people not wanting to do that sort of work. I'm just
Jamie, just on how you make them. You say carrots and sticks. Before you went into farming, or before you returned to farming, you were in the British Army, and I'm sure you would have seen how it was possible to take some unpromising material, people from really difficult backgrounds, and encourage them to make something of themselves. Now, some of the methods used, let's say, 30 years ago wouldn't be tolerated anymore. They'd be, the stick would no longer be acceptable. But I think many of us feel in our bones that if you expose somebody to a different kind of life, got them out of some of the sink estates, for a fortnight and showed them that actually there is a life on the land, for instance, that involves getting your knees dirty and, becoming a slightly horny-handed son of toil or daughter of toil, their life would be better for it.
Well, as so often, Colin, we we are of the same mind on this. Funny enough, it was something I was going to raise. And you're right. I mean, in the army, I did see recruits coming in who you thought would be pretty unemployable, doing almost anything. And within a few years, you saw that they were non-commissioned officers and responsible citizens and really, really good people and well motivated. And I think maybe there does need to be some sort of boot camp set up, or maybe a mentoring scheme actually. To get people, it could be lay people, don't have to be civil servants, older people who actually help people to, sort of life coaches to get a grip of themselves and actually get into employment. And I think it will be a scandal if we have another problem like, when there were pigs backing up on farms because nobody was in the abattoirs to slaughter them, fruit going unpicked in the fields. I mean, we have, as a society, we have to find a way through this. And the government, I know, is very focused on this and is doing what they can. And I don't think it's unique to the UK either. But we really cannot go on like this, just paying people to do nothing when picking fruit, milking cows is semi-skilled, but it's not high-skilled. These sort of jobs need to be done. And I'll just give a quick plug for my book, which comes out next week, Land of Milk and Honey. There we are. Colin, I know you read my last one.
I enjoyed it. Great.
Yeah. This is a sequel. And, I think, there is a good life to be had in agriculture. And it's such a shame when there are people, as you say, living in sink estates in towns, if they would just get out into the countryside and see what opportunities there are. And, of course, that used to happen.
Yeah,
in the old days.
It did. And Jamie, something else as well.
They all used to go and pick hops in the summer.
Yeah, and as you pointed out before, 50%, that's the amount of food that we produce for our own people. We only produce half of it. So this isn't just something about getting people back into work. It's of national strategic importance. We know how fragile those supply chains can be. We saw it during lockdown, didn't we? So farming matters more than ever.
Did, yeah.
Jamie, we've got to leave it, I'm afraid. We look forward to reading your book. Thanks very much indeed. Jamie Blackett there.
Thanks, Colin.
Coming up, we'll debate the big topic of the day. One of them, should we raise the legal age to buy cigarettes to 21? First, the latest news with Ray.
Thanks, Colin. It's 5:33. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has faced questions in the Commons for the first time since surviving Monday's confidence vote, telling MPs he's getting on with the job. Although Boris Johnson won the vote, 41% of his own party said they had no confidence in his leadership. The vote was prompted by the Sue Gray report into lockdown parties, but MPs are also unhappy with legislation to override the Northern Ireland Protocol and high taxes. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says when the PM falls short, he changes the rules and lowers the bar.
Pretending no rules were broken didn't work. Pretending the economy is booming didn't work. And pretending to build 40 new hospitals won't work either. They want him to change, but he can't.
But what we're doing more fundamentally is doing what the people of this country can see is simple common sense, and that is using our economic strength to invest in doctors and nurses and get people on the wards, get people giving people their scans and their screens and their tests in a more timely manner, and taking our NHS forward.
Members of the Unite Union at Transport for London and London Underground say they also will strike on the 21st of this month. That's the same day as a walkout by the RMT. It comes after the Prime Minister labelled the industrial action reckless and unwanted. The RMT is calling its walkout on the 21st, 23rd and 25th of June the biggest strike of the railways since 1989. A Berlin politician says placards relating to Turkey have been found in the car of a man who allegedly drove into a crowd of people in the city, killing one person. Germany's Bild newspaper says the victim was a teacher who'd been with a group of her schoolchildren. More than a dozen people have been injured, 6 with life-threatening injuries. The 29-year-old German-Armenian driver has been detained. The Home Office says it's still planning to fly dozens of asylum seekers to Rwanda, despite campaigners launching High Court action to block the move. The Public and Commercial Services Union, Care for Calais and Detention Action say lawyers have submitted papers to stop next week's flight to the East African nation. They're challenging what they describe as an unlawful policy by the Home Office. And the UK's Crown Prosecution Service has authorised indecent assault charges against Hollywood film producer Harvey Weinstein. The 70-year-old faces 2 counts of indecent assault against a woman between July and August 1996. The decision follows a review of evidence gathered during a Met Police investigation. The force says the woman is now in her 50s. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Back to Brazier in just a sec.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound is 1.255 to the dollar and 1.169 to the euro. And the price of gold currently stands at £1,478 and 42 pence per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you. And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Time for our debate this hour. The legal smoking age in the UK could be raised to 21 as part of a radical review. It's always a radical review, isn't it? Health Secretary Sajid Javid refused today to rule out raising the age from 18. There's been a review by Javid Khan, former Chief Executive of Barnardo's. It's due out tomorrow. And it's prompting this question: should we raise the legal age to buy cigs to 21? Simon Clark is from the pro-smoking group Forest. Doug Mutter is in favour of increasing the age limit. Gentlemen, welcome to you both. Simon, let's start with you. I know I've seen a press release that you've issued saying it's potty in the context of having a coherent approach to how old people should be to judge risk. At 16, they can have sex, they can join the army, but they have to wait till 21 to buy cigarettes if this goes through.
Hello, Colin. Yes, just to quickly correct you, we're not pro-smoking, we're pro-choice, because we've never encouraged anybody to smoke. We totally accept that there are serious health risks associated with smoking, and we support all education campaigns to educate people about the health risks of smoking. But when people get to 18, they are fully informed about the health risks of smoking. I have 2 children, both in their 20s now. They were under no illusions when they were 18 about the health risks of smoking because it was drummed into them from a very, very early age. And that goes for every other child these days. And so to raise it to 21 infantilizes young adults. I mean, if they are adults at the age of 18, which legally they are, government must treat them like adults. We can't treat them like small children, because what we have to do in this country is stop having the state interfere all the time. We need to put personal choice and personal responsibility back at the top of the political agenda, because people have to take responsibility for their own health. They have to be encouraged to do that by educating themselves. But if they choose to make decisions that government doesn't like, we have to respect that choice, especially when we're talking about a legal product such as tobacco.
Doug Mutter, is there not another problem, which is that we force it underground? I mean, I think of my older daughters, who all either vape or smoke, or actually do a bit of both. And if you said to them, actually, you'll have to be 21 before you buy a packet of fags, they'd find a way. And in so doing, their respect for the rule of law would just diminish that little bit. And I think that's really corrosive.
I think just firstly, for clarity and context, my position is not that I'm supportive of a raise of the age. That's a decision for the government and the government alone to make. My point is more around that what the government should bring out of this review is further education, to touch on the point that Simon's mentioned there, further education to clear away the misinformation in terms of what alternatives there are to smoking out there, vaping being a major one that's having an impact. So any decision on the legal age to buy is a decision for the government alone to make and justify.
Just on vaping, and I hear what you're saying, and I think I agree with a lot of what you're saying. But it's true that I could walk from where I sit in Paddington, and I could take you down. Maybe you know some of the outlets on Oxford Street, who are flogging vapes, which are, the contents are 50 times stronger, some of them, than cigarettes.
Which is a huge opportunity, because there are so many. The very street you're talking about walking down, these retailers aren't specialist vape retailers. They're selling gifts and souvenirs. They're not licensed in any way. And as part of our work with the UK VIA, we're really pushing that to sell vaping products, you should have a license. You should be a specialist retailer, because that negates any of the issues that you're talking about right there. And people are then going to gain the correct advice on their journey if they want to switch from smoking to vaping, because they are with a specialist who has gone through training and understands what the product is.
OK, Simon, just a final thought, if we may, on the sort of philosophy behind this. It seems to me that in a free society, people have the right to wreck their health. I mean, I mentioned in my monologue in the last hour, there was a Northern Irishman who tragically died on the Isle of Man a couple of days ago. 260 plus riders have died in the Isle of Man TT races since 1911. People have a fundamental right to take risks if that's what they want to do.
Well, that's absolutely right. And I actually don't smoke, but I am overweight. I'm probably morbidly obese. I know I should lose weight, but what is not going to get me to lose weight is the government bullying me, hectoring me, and trying to force me to lose weight, because I will simply turn around and say, it's none of your business how much I weigh. If I choose to lose weight, that's up to me. And the same thing goes for smoking. We're very supportive of vaping, because we believe it's great that there is a choice of reduced risk products. But if you choose to smoke because you actually prefer smoking to vaping, then government must respect that choice. And we can't have a situation where some people are trying to get smoking banned, because effectively what this proposal is, it's a form of creeping prohibition. We've seen it with the smoking ban. We've seen it with the ban on menthol cigarettes, where an entire category of cigarette was banned. Now they're trying to ban young adults from smoking or buying tobacco. It's totally wrong.
Simon Clarke, Doug Mutter, appreciate your time. Thanks very much indeed. It's a conversation we will return to. Now, here's another one. 40 years ago today, Ronald Reagan became the first US president to address both houses of Parliament. The UK Prime Minister of the day, Margaret Thatcher, was determined to grant Reagan the rare honour of addressing British parliamentarians. President Reagan later wrote in his memoirs that it was one of his most important speeches. Well, we've been talking to Sarah Elliott, who was born in America, grew up in America, now lives in the UK, and is a Reagan fan. Rarer still is Maria Murphy, who's a Reagan fan but a Brit. For why, Maria? I mean, I don't know what a Ronald Reagan fan looks like, but here you are.
Well, I suppose, what does a Ronald Reagan fan look like? I think for me, what it comes down to with Ronald Reagan, and always has and always will, is, Colin, it's the F word, it's freedom. Everything that drove Ronald Reagan was to do with freedom. It was to do with individual liberties and the right of people to choose their own destiny and to keep their own property. He had this kind of John Locke-style motivation that people should be the drivers of their own destiny, and he believed fundamentally in that the state should keep out of people's lives. And I think in the last 2 years, particularly with lockdowns and effectively, a cultural curb on free speech in terms of challenging these notions, these things have become more clear than ever. And also on a personal level, to see someone from such humble beginnings make it to the top through driving this concept of freedom and that people's, meritocracy and people should be the architect of their own destiny. To me, that's very inspiring and very important. And I think it's what you said earlier, Sarah. I heard you say freedom is timeless.
Maria, people consistently underestimated him, and he was just this gormless actor. He looked good, but he didn't have much of a brain. Actually, he was studying Hayek. And he was very well read. He wasn't. I'm not going to use the word intellectual, but there was a big old brain there.
Yeah. Well, and he was trailblazing supply-side economics. There was all these new thoughts of how to stimulate the economy and grow the pie, and he was willing to take a risk on that. And also over here on this side of the Atlantic, Margaret Thatcher took that risk too, and it worked. It paid off for them. 17 million jobs were created in the 1980s. We saw this huge boom that we had never, that the U.S. hadn't experienced in, over 10 years since the end of the Second World War. So it was instrumental in beating the Soviets. Yeah. If we didn't have that massive economy, we could not have built up our defences and basically bankrupt them.
Maria, you will know that I'm always stealing other people's mugs in the newsroom, and I've taken often to stealing yours for the simple reason it's got a picture of Ronald Reagan on it.
With love hearts.
With love hearts. and you've also got a notepad with Ronald Reagan's image plastered on the front of it. What do your contemporaries make of your attachment to a former American president who... It's not everybody's cup of tea.
Well, I think on first glance, when people first find out, if they don't know me very well, they're surprised. People who've known me for years, they're not the least bit surprised. I mean, I've been a raging Thatcherite since the age of 13. I used to bore people...
How does that happen?
Don't ask me, Colin. I'm not sure. It is fundamentally because I was inspired by the notion of freedom. I'm from very humble beginnings myself, and I wanted to see these kind of stories and to know that that's the way that people achieve. That was really inspiring to me. People find it odd, I guess, but I think it's like what Sarah said. It is a timeless notion, and I think the more people learn about, because in my view, there's not actually that many mainstream politicians who are completely focused on freedom being the motivation behind all policy making, and to see people need to know about this because
they do,
it's
exciting. I think they need to look at examples. And we've been talking today, and if you are just tuning in, it's the 40th anniversary of Ronald Reagan addressing both houses of Parliament here in the UK. And Sarah Elliott, we were talking earlier about what lessons, if you are Boris and you are climbing the walls at the moment thinking, how can I turn this ship of state around before I'm toast? The time for eye-catching tax cuts, for instance.
Yeah, and deregulation as well. So it's not just, tax cuts are great because they stimulate, people to take risks or re-enter the marketplace or save their earnings, but you also have to deregulate as well. You have to look at because regulations can act as a tax, an invisible tax, that prevents, exploration and new ideas. And so we just need a little bit of fire under us to get going.
Maria Murphy, I haven't seen your Ronald Reagan mug for a couple of weeks, is it?
It's gone missing, Colin.
OK, well...
Yeah, I'll get you one in the US.
Perfect.
Brilliant. Maria Murphy, thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Colin.
There's a row between residents and councillors in the Kentish town of Bystander after two parish councillors decided to live full-time in France whilst undertaking their local duties. John and Fabienne Hughes have more than 70 villagers now apparently trying to oust them. The parish clerk, Erin Sugden, has defended the couple, saying a lot of the duties in the role can be performed via email and online. Joining me is Jackie Weaver, Chief Officer of the Cheshire Association of Local Councils, I should say.
Hello there.
Yeah, hi, Jackie. Welcome to you. I'm a great fan of parish councils. In my Cub reporter days, sat through quite a few meetings of them, and thought they were a lovely flowering of grassroots democracy. But can you serve on one from a different country?
I totally understand what the clerk's saying, and a lot of the technical stuff, of course it can be done by email. But actually one of the real blessings, and I think you kind of alluded to it, of our town or parish councillor is the fact that they are so hands-on and they're so accessible. And I'm afraid across the pond, no, they're not accessible there.
Jackie, just for people who don't know what a parish council actually does. They're the very sort of base of the pyramid of democracy, aren't they? What sort of things do they deal with, and who typically are they?
Well, typically they are your neighbours. They are people in the community who have a passion for that community, who want to see that the local community gets everything it deserves.
Busybodies, Jackie? Busybodies?
Pardon?
Busybodies?
Busybodies? Well, in a way, yes. But I think we need to celebrate that. And don't forget, during the pandemic, oh my goodness, we were really grateful for busybodies, because they're the very people who would know when somebody vulnerable was on their own.
Yeah, absolutely right. And in terms of, they're not spending a lot of money. They don't have a lot of money to play with, to some degree, when it comes to things like planning decisions.
Do they not?
Well, they get a bit of a mini precept, don't they? But they can express a view on. They don't get any money.
No, your point is incorrect. They can have shed loads of money.
Oh.
I can only speak for Cheshire, but I see no reason why it's not repeated across the country. Our smallest councils are exactly like you're describing. Small precept, 5 to 10,000, do mainly kind of consultative. But our town councils, £2 million budget.
Now you're talking about town councils, Jackie.
Town councils are exactly the same. Just a slightly bigger geographical area.
Lovely. And just on the point, on the point of serving from abroad, if you were this particular council and these two parish councillors say, look, we can do it. We've got, you all people are working from home. We're working from France. We see the same agenda items and minutes that you all get. We can do it from France. You would say to them what?
I think the problem is that actually nobody can do anything about it other than the two councillors themselves. The only way they will be removed is at the next election, or if they choose to resign. The parish council itself cannot make them go.
That's democracy for you. Jackie Weaver, so lovely to talk to you. Thanks for your time. Thanks very much indeed. Michelle Dewberry is next. Hi, Michelle.
Hello, Colin. Yes, coming up now. I don't know, you might have been under a cave or something the last few weeks. If you have, you might not be aware that pretty much all the airports in the UK are struggling at the moment. And now one of the main ones has come out and said you can expect the disruption, Colin, to remain for up to 18 more months. So I'm looking at what on earth is going on, who's to blame and what we're going to do about it. And also school meals. In Scotland, over £1 million is owed by people that should have paid, parents that should have paid for school meals and didn't. It's created large calls, I've got to say, that all schools in the UK should provide all pupils with a free meal every single day. Should they? Is it a school's responsibility to feed your children irrespective of your income? And monkeypox, Colin, there's about 67 million people in this country at the moment. About 300 of them have got monkeypox. So why are we getting so obsessed with it? We'll have that and more in just a few minutes.
We know why, because of COVID, don't we? Michelle, thanks very much indeed. Sarah Elliott's just going to ponder on free school meals, because I can see you shaking your head.
No, you have children, you feed your children, and most of this country can feed its children, and it should feed its children. It's not the nanny state. If you are in dire straits, that's one thing, but I think we should all aim to feed our own children and be independent of the nanny state.
OK, Sarah Elliott, thanks very much indeed. Loads of emails coming in, especially on the question of raising the legal age at which you can buy cigarettes to 21. We think that's going to be announced tomorrow. Is it an infringement on free rights to do what you like? Is it infantilising people? We'll try and address that one for you tomorrow. More news coming up. Stay with us.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Further showers, even some thunderstorms for many of us through the rest of the day, but brighter spells will develop in places and it will turn drier later on. However, low pressure is in charge at the moment, that low pressure sitting just to the north of Northern Ireland, and it has brought a weather front north across the UK. That's effectively stalled in central Scotland, and just to the south of that with light winds, some slow-moving showers and thunderstorms could cause some issues for southern Scotland, northeast England. A yellow warning in force here. Showers elsewhere will move through more quickly and die away during the evening. By the end of the night, just some remnants of the weather front there spilling into southwest Scotland and northwest England to give some dribs and drabs of rain. A lot of low cloud for eastern Scotland, northeast England to wake up to on Thursday. Brighter skies further south across much of the rest of England as well as Wales. Doesn't last in the west. I think for Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest, it turns cloudy and damp during the afternoon. The more persistent rain over western hills. It also turns increasingly breezy, and that will impact the temperatures. I think 16 or 17 Celsius at best, Cardiff and Plymouth. Still 20 there for Newcastle and Norwich, where it will be largely sunny in the east of England. Eastern Scotland seeing some showers, and the cloud and rain in the west during the evening does eventually push east, but it tends to fade away. And what's more notable, I